Commander Zethkri had seen many horrors in his 30 years of service to the Galactic Empire. Plasma burns that melted through battle armor, acid storms that dissolved entire colonies, warriors who fought until their last breath left their bodies. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sounds coming from the human prisoner's cell. The screaming started at dawn, not the desperate cries of torture or the wails of madness. These were different, raw, primal, like a beast calling for blood. "Chef!" the human's voice echoed through the detention block. "Behind you! Move your sorry hide!" Zethkri's 6 eyes narrowed as he approached cell block 7. The other prisoners, hardened criminals from across the galaxy, cowered in their cells. Even the Karnathi death worshippers, known for their fearlessness, pressed themselves against the far walls of their cages. "Where's my knife?" the human roared again. "I said medium rare, not charcoal." The commander stopped at the reinforced door. Through the observation window, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The human male, barely 5.5 feet tall, unremarkable by any military standard, stood in the center of his cell. His hands moved in violent, precise motions, chopping, slicing, stabbing at invisible targets. But it was his eyes that truly terrified Zethkri. They burned with an intensity that spoke of countless battles, of victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, of a warrior who had never known surrender. "What is the human doing?" Zethkri asked the guard, a nervous Vectani whose scales were pale with fear. "Sir, we don't know. He's been doing this for 3 days straight, making those sounds, those movements. Our psychologists say he's either having a complete mental breakdown or what?" The guard's voice dropped to a whisper. "Or he's training for something, sir." Zethkri activated the cell's communication system. "Human, explain your actions." The man stopped mid-motion. He turned slowly, and Zethkri saw something in those brown eyes that made him step back involuntarily. It wasn't insanity, it was focus. Pure, deadly focus. "Name's Jake Morrison," the human said, his voice suddenly calm. "Former Marine, former chef, and right now I'm practicing." "Practicing for what?" Jake's lips curved into a smile that contained no warmth. "For the day I get out of here. See, Commander, where I come from we have a saying, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. But me?" He resumed his violent movements, his hands cutting through the air with lethal precision. "I've never met a kitchen I couldn't handle." Zethkri felt a chill run down his spine. "You are a prisoner of the Galactic Empire. You will never leave this facility." Jake stopped again. This time his smile widened. "That's what the last 5 facilities said. But here's the thing about us humans, Commander. We don't just survive. We adapt, we overcome, and we never, ever give up." The human's eyes locked onto Zethkri's through the window. "Tell me, Commander, have you ever heard of something called a pressure cooker?" Before Zethkri could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the detention facility. Red lights flashed as an automated voice echoed. "Through the corridors. Hull breach detected. Hull breach detected. This is not a drill." Jake's smile became predatory. "Looks like dinner's about to be served." The hull breach wasn't an accident. As emergency lights bathed the detention facility in crimson, Jake Morrison stood calmly in his cell, watching the chaos unfold beyond his door. Guards ran past his window, their weapons drawn, their voices sharp with panic. "Hull breach in Section C7, someone shouted. "Atmospheric containment failing." Jake closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Even through the cell's air recycling system he could smell it. The sharp, metallic scent of twisted metal. The acrid burn of emergency sealant foam. And underneath it all, something else. Fear. Commander Zethkri's voice crackled over the facility's communication system. "All units to emergency stations. This is a code red situation. Repeat, code red." Jake opened his eyes and looked directly at the observation camera. "Commander, you still there?" The response was immediate. "Human, you will remain in your cell. Any attempt to what?" Jake interrupted. "To escape? Commander, I've been in this box for 6 months. 6 months of watching your people, learning your routines, studying your weaknesses." He began pacing, his movements fluid and controlled. "You want to know what I've learned? Silence from the comm system. I've learned that your guards change shifts every 8 hours. I've learned that your emergency protocols prioritize the upper levels first. I've learned that when your people panic, they forget the most basic rules of security. Jake stopped, pacing and faced the camera. And I've learned that you've never dealt with a human who's spent 15 years in professional kitchens. What does cooking have to do with everything? Jake's voice turned deadly serious. In a kitchen, you learn to work under pressure, real pressure. When the orders are backing up, when the heat is unbearable, when everything is going wrong, at once. That's when you find out what you're really made of. Another explosion rocked the facility. Closer this time. You also learn to use every tool at your disposal, Jake continued. A chef's knife isn't just for chopping vegetables. A meat tenderizer isn't just for tenderizing meat. And a pressure cooker. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Well, a pressure cooker can do a lot more than cook food. Commander. Zethkri's voice was tight with tension. Are you saying you caused the hull breach? Jake laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Commander, I'm saying that for 6 months, I've been saving every piece of metal from my food trays. Every small component from the cell's maintenance panel. Every chemical from the cleaning supplies they gave me. The lights flickered as another explosion sent tremors through the station. You see, in my world, we have something called molecular gastronomy. It's about understanding how different substances interact at the atomic level, how they bond, how they react, how they... Jake's eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. How they explode. Zethkri's silence spoke volumes. I've been cooking, Commander. For 6 months, I've been preparing the most important meal of my life. And the main course? Jake walked to his cell door and placed his palm against the reinforced metal. The main course is freedom. The door's lock mechanism began to smoke. Impossible, Zethkri whispered. That door requires a biometric scan and a thermal override, Jake finished. Amazing what you can learn from the maintenance crew when you pretend to be sleeping. The lock mechanism sparked and died. Here's another thing about kitchens, Commander. Sometimes the best recipes are the ones nobody expects. The cell door slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped into the corridor, his movements calm and purposeful. He looked up at the security camera and gave a small, respectful nod. Thanks for the hospitality, Commander. But I think it's time I showed you what a real Deathworlder can do when he's hungry for justice. He disappeared into the smoke-filled corridor, leaving only the echo of his words and the growing realization that the Galactic Empire had just made its greatest mistake. They had underestimated a human. Jake Morrison moved through the detention facility like a predator who had memorized every shadow. 6 months of careful observation had mapped every corridor, every guard station, every weakness in their security. But it wasn't just knowledge that made him dangerous. It was the fusion of 2 skills that should never have met. The skills of a warrior and a chef. In the armory, Jake found what he needed. Not the advanced plasma rifles or energy weapons. Those required biometric locks and training he didn't have. Instead, he gathered the tools that spoke to his soul. A vibro knife with a monomolecular edge, a thermal cutter, a portable chemical analyzer. To the guards, these were maintenance tools. To Jake, they were extensions of his body. Subject has breached the armory, a voice reported over the facility's communication system. He's taken maintenance equipment? Commander Zethkri's confusion was audible. Maintenance equipment? Why would he? The question was answered when Jake encountered his first patrol. 3 guards, armed with standard plasma rifles, turned the corner and found him standing in the middle of the corridor. They saw a small human male holding what looked like kitchen utensils. They saw easy prey. They were wrong. Jake moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years navigating cramped kitchen spaces during the dinner rush. He ducked under the first plasma bolt, his body flowing like water. The vibro knife in his left hand sang through the air, severing the guard's weapon at the barrel. The thermal cutter in his right hand drew a precise line across the second guard's armor, opening it like a tin can. The third guard, a Karnathi warrior twice Jake's size, raised his weapon. Jake threw the chemical analyzer with deadly accuracy. It struck the alien's weapon hand, triggering a cascade of chemical reactions. Smoke filled the corridor. When it cleared, 3 guards lay unconscious. Their weapons were neatly disassembled. Their armor was carefully removed and sorted by size and function. Jake's voice echoed through the empty corridor. In professional kitchens, we call this mise en place. Everything in its place, everything prepared. Commander Zethkri watched through security cameras, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. How is this possible? He's a single human against trained warriors. His aide, a nervous Vectani named Sisk, consulted his datapad. Sir, I've been reviewing the human's file. He served in something called the Marine Corps for 8 years. After that, he worked in... It translates to high-pressure food preparation. Environments. Food preparation? Zethkri's voice rose. We're being infiltrated by a cook. On the screens, Jake had reached the facility's central computer core. He worked with the same methodical precision he had shown in combat. The thermal cutter opened access panels. The vibro knife stripped wires with surgical precision. The chemical compounds he had synthesized over 6 months did their work on the security systems. Sir, Sisk's voice was barely a whisper. I've found additional information. The human's military record shows he was part of something called Force Reconnaissance. Elite warriors trained for impossible missions. Zethkri felt his scales tighten with fear. And after the military, he managed what they call a 5-star restaurant. The pressure, the coordination, the split-second timing required. Sisk looked up from his datapad, his eyes wide. Sir, we didn't capture a simple soldier or a simple cook. We captured someone who spent years combining the precision of warfare with the chaos management of professional food service. On the screen, Jake had accessed the facility's main computer. His fingers moved across the alien interface with impossible familiarity. How does he know our systems? Zethkri demanded. Jake's voice came through the intercom, calm and controlled. 6 months of watching your technicians, Commander. 6 months of memorizing every command, every protocol. You know what the most important skill in a professional kitchen is? It's not cooking. It's learning. The lights throughout the facility began to flicker, learning to adapt to any situation, learning to use any tool, learning to turn pressure into performance. Jake's voice carried the weight of absolute confidence, and learning that the difference between a great chef and a great warrior is just the choice of ingredients. Every cell door in the detention facility unlocked simultaneously. Welcome to the main course, Commander. Hope you're hungry. Chaos erupted through the detention facility as 200 of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals poured from their cells. Murderers, pirates, terrorists, beings who had been caged for crimes that made hardened soldiers wake up screaming, but none of them moved toward the exits. Instead, they gathered around Jake Morrison, forming a circle of respect that transcended species and past crimes. In the emergency lighting, their eyes gleamed with something Commander Zethkri had never seen before. Hope. Listen up, Jake said, his voice cutting through the noise. I know most of you have no reason to trust me. I'm human. I'm small. And 6 months ago, I was just another prisoner. A massive Krulon pirate, his scarred hide marked with gang tattoos, stepped forward. Human, you have freed us. But this station has defense systems that will kill us all before we reach the hangar. Jake nodded. Kresh, right? Sentenced for raiding 17 Imperial supply convoys. The Krulon's eyes widened. How do you know? Because I've spent 6 months listening to every conversation, every guard rotation, every piece of intelligence that's moved through this place. Jake looked around the circle of faces. And I know that every single one of you has skills this empire thought they could waste by locking you in a box. He pointed to a slender Zephrani female. Vila, computer intrusion specialist, could crack Imperial encryption in her sleep. Then to a scarred Vorthan male. Grix, demolitions expert, took out an Imperial battlecruiser with nothing but mining equipment. One by one he named them, their crimes, their specialties, their reasons for fighting. The question isn't whether we can escape, Jake continued. The question is whether we're going to let the Empire define who we are, or whether we're going to remind them why they locked us up in the first place. Through the facility's speakers, Commander Zethkri's voice boomed. Attention, prisoners. Return to your cells immediately. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Jake smiled that cold, predatory smile. Vila, can you give me access to their communication system? The Zafrani female's fingers danced across a wall terminal. Done. Jake's voice echoed through every speaker in the station. Commander, I want you to think about something. You've got 200 of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals loose in your facility. But that's not your real problem. Static filled the air as Zethkri tried to cut the transmission. Your real problem, Jake continued, is that you're dealing with someone who's spent years managing teams under pressure. Someone who knows how to take individual talents and forge them into something greater. The facility's defense systems activated. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, their targeting systems scanning for escaped prisoners. Grix, Jake said, calmly. Those turrets have a weakness. The power conduit is exposed on the underside. Think you can reach it? The Vorthan's tusks gleamed in a fierce grin. With pleasure. As explosions rocked the facility, Jake's voice remained steady. See, Commander. In a professional kitchen, you learn that every position is crucial. The prep cook, the line cook, the expediter. Everyone has a role. Everyone matters. More turrets exploded as Grix and his team worked their way through the facility's defenses. And the most important lesson? Jake paused, letting the silence build. The most important lesson is that a great chef doesn't just give orders. He leads by example. The main blast door to the hangar began to buckle and warp. Through the smoke, Commander Zethkri could see Jake Morrison standing at the center of the chaos, directing his team with the calm precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Impossible, Zethkri whispered. One human can't coordinate this kind of operation. His aide Sisk looked up from his tactical display, his scales pale with fear. Sir, it's not just coordination. Look at the patterns, the timing, the resource allocation. This isn't just an escape, it's a masterpiece of tactical planning. On the screens, Jake was already moving toward the hangar, his makeshift army flowing around him like water. But as they reached the main corridor, a new alarm began to sound. Sir, Sisk's voice cracked. Imperial reinforcements have arrived. 3 destroyers with full marine complements. Zethkri allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Even this human can't fight the entire Imperial Navy. But Jake's voice cut through the alarm, calm and confident. Actually, Commander, that's exactly what I was hoping for. The hangar doors exploded outward, revealing something that made Zethkri's blood turn to ice. Jake Morrison wasn't trying to escape. He was preparing to serve the Empire a meal they would never forget. The Imperial destroyers hung in space like predatory birds, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to glass a planet. Inside the detention facility, Commander Zethkri watched his tactical display with growing satisfaction. 3,000 Imperial Marines were preparing to board. The station, Jake Morrison and his ragtag band of prisoners were trapped. Sir, reported Captain Vextai from the lead destroyer, boarding parties are ready. We'll have the situation contained within the hour. But Zethkri noticed something odd on his sensors. Captain, are you reading energy fluctuations from the station's reactor core? Affirmative, sir. Looks like the prisoners are trying to overload the reactor. Desperate move. They'll kill themselves along with us. Jake's voice crackled through the station's communication system. Commander, you still there? Human, you're surrounded. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. Death? Jake laughed, and the sound sent chills through every alien on the bridge. Commander, I need to tell you something about humans. We don't just fight to win, we fight to survive. And when we fight to survive... His voice dropped to a whisper. We get creative. The first boarding party breached the station's outer hull. 50 heavily armed Marines poured through the breach, their weapons ready, their tactics flawless. They were met by silence. Boarding Party Alpha to command, the squad leader reported. No resistance encountered. Proceeding to... The transmission cut off. Alpha Team, report. Captain Vextai's voice was tight. Alpha Team, respond. Static. Commander Zethkri activated the station's internal sensors. What he saw made no sense. The boarding party had simply vanished. 50 Marines, gone without a trace. Boarding Party Beta, proceed with extreme caution, Vextai ordered. The second wave entered the station. This time, Zethkri watched every sensor, every camera feed. The Marines moved through the corridors in perfect formation, their weapons sweeping every corner. Then the lights went out. When the emergency lighting kicked in, the Marines were gone. "This is impossible," Zethkri breathed. "How can a handful of prisoners neutralize our best troops?" Jake's voice echoed through the station again. "Commander, have you ever heard of something called molecular gastronomy?" "Stop playing games. Human, no games, just education." Jake's tone was conversational, almost friendly. "See, molecular gastronomy is about understanding how substances interact at the most basic level, how nitrogen can flash freeze organic matter, how certain chemical combinations can create interesting reactions." On his sensor displays, Zethkri watched in horror as the third boarding party encountered something that defied explanation. The Marines' equipment began to malfunction. Their armor started to dissolve. Their weapons ceased to function. Within minutes, another 50 soldiers had simply ceased to exist. "What are you doing to my men?" Zethkri demanded. "Teaching them," Jake replied. "Teaching them that humans are called Deathworlders for a reason. We come from a planet where everything, the weather, the predators, the very air we breathe, is trying to kill us. We've learned to adapt, to improvise, to turn the environment itself into a weapon." The station's reactor core was reaching critical levels, but not from overload. The energy readings were off the charts, but they were controlled. "Focused." "Sir," Sisk whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the station, but they're not random. They're organized." Jake's voice carried a note of pride. 6 months, Commander. 6 months of collecting every bit of material, every chemical compound, every piece of technology in this facility. Do you know what the most dangerous thing in the universe is? "Enlighten me," Zethkri snarled, a human with time to prepare. The station's hull began to change. Metal flowed like liquid, reforming, reshaping. What had been a simple detention facility was becoming something else. Something that had never been seen before in the galaxy. "Impossible," Captain Vextai whispered from his destroyer. "Sir, the station it's transforming." Jake's voice filled the bridge of every Imperial ship. "Gentlemen, welcome to humanity's first contribution to galactic cuisine. I call it the revenge course. The main ingredient? Every single piece of Imperial technology you've ever built." The transformed station turned its weapons that had been created from the destroyer's own boarding parties, toward the Imperial fleet. "And the secret ingredient," Jake continued, his voice now carrying the weight of absolute victory, "is something you've never encountered before. Human ingenuity seasoned with 6 months of righteous anger." Commander Zethkri stared at his screens, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. "This is impossible. You're one human against the entire Imperial Navy." "No, Commander." Jake's voice was soft now, almost gentle. "I'm not one human. I'm every human who ever refused to quit. Every human who ever turned disadvantage into advantage. Every human who ever looked at an impossible situation and said, 'Hold my beer.'" The station's new weapons began to charge. "And right now, Commander, I'm very, very hungry for justice." The Imperial destroyers opened fire simultaneously, their plasma cannons lighting up space with deadly brilliance. Enough firepower to reduce a moon to rubble struck the transformed station and bounced off harmlessly. "Report!" Commander Zethkri screamed at his tactical officer. "Sir, the station's hull is reflecting our weapons. Some kind of adaptive armor we've never seen before." Jake's voice filled the bridge, calm and conversational. "Commander, that's the beauty of molecular gastronomy. When you understand how matter works at the atomic level, you can make it do incredible things, like turn your own weapons against you." The station's surface rippled like liquid metal, absorbing the Imperial fire and redirecting it back toward the fleet. The lead destroyer's shields flared as its own weapons struck its hull. "Impossible," Zethkri whispered. "No prison facility has that kind of technology." "You're right," Jake agreed. "A prison facility doesn't. But what about a facility that's been completely reconstructed by 200 of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals, led by someone who spent 15 years learning that the impossible is just another word for not yet attempted. On the bridge of the destroyer, Captain Vextai watched his sensor readings with growing horror. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the station. Whatever they're preparing, it's big." Through the station's transformed hull, Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the detention facility's central core. Around him, his army of former prisoners worked with the precision of a master chef's kitchen staff. Each had their role. Each knew their place in the grand recipe he had designed. Vila, the Zephrani hacker, had turned the station's computers into a neural network, more advanced than anything the Empire had ever seen. Grix, the Vorthan demolitions expert, had transformed the facility's power systems into the most sophisticated weapons platform in the galaxy. And Jake stood at the center of it all, conducting his orchestra of chaos with the calm precision of someone who had spent years managing kitchen chaos during the dinner rush. "You know what the most important rule is in professional cooking, Commander?" Jake asked as he monitored the station's systems. "Timing. Everything depends on timing. The station's weapons, forged from the molecular remains of Imperial boarding parties and powered by the fury of 200 wrongly imprisoned souls, began to target the destroyer fleet." "Sir," Sisk whispered, his voice barely audible, "our weapons aren't even scratching that station, but their weapons." The first shot from the station struck the lead destroyer's engine section. The blast didn't just damage the ship, it converted the metal itself into more ammunition for the station's growing arsenal. "You see," Jake continued, his voice filled with the satisfaction of a job well done. "In a professional kitchen, waste is the enemy. Everything gets used. Everything has purpose. Even the scraps become ingredients for something greater." The second destroyer tried to retreat, but the station's weapons moved with impossible speed and accuracy. Another shot, another ship converted into raw materials for Jake's growing fleet. "This is Admiral Korath of the Imperial Navy," a new voice crackled through the communications. "Unknown vessel, you are ordered to surrender immediately." Jake's laughter filled the bridge of every Imperial ship within 1,000 light years. "Admiral, this is Chef Morrison, formerly of Earth, formerly of the United States Marine Corps, formerly of Le Bernardin Restaurant, currently of the business of serving justice to those who deserve it. You're one human against the entire Imperial Navy." "Admiral," Jake's voice carried the weight of absolute confidence, "I'm not just one human. I'm the human who spent 6 months planning this meal. I'm the human who turned a prison into a weapon. I'm the human who taught 200 dangerous criminals to work together like a team that's been cooking together for years." The station began to move, its hull rippling and changing as it accelerated toward the Imperial fleet. "But most importantly," Jake continued, "I'm the human who learned that the difference between a great chef and a great warrior is just the choice of ingredients. And today, Admiral, the main ingredient is Imperial arrogance." The remaining destroyers opened fire with everything they had. The station absorbed their attacks, grew stronger, added their energy to its own power systems. "Sir," Captain Vexitai's voice was barely a whisper, "our weapons are only making it stronger." Admiral Korath watched his tactical display with growing horror. Every shot his fleet fired was being absorbed, processed, and turned into more weapons for the impossible station. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Jake's voice softened slightly. "I want you to remember this moment, Admiral. I want you to remember that you tried to break the human spirit and instead created something you never imagined possible. The station's weapons powered down, but only slightly. And I want you to deliver a message to your empire." "What message?" Jake's voice carried across space, reaching every Imperial ship, every Imperial outpost, every corner of the galaxy where humans were considered lesser beings. "Tell them that Earth's children are no longer content to be appetizers. From now on, we're the main course." 3 months later, Admiral Korath stood before the Galactic Empire's High Council, his once proud uniform stained with defeat. The holographic projectors showed the aftermath of what Imperial intelligence had classified as the Morrison Incident. 17 Imperial facilities had fallen, not destroyed, transformed. Each one converted into a fortress of impossible technology, crewed by former prisoners who now fought with the precision of a master chef's kitchen staff. Explain to us, demanded High Counselor Thrace, her voice dripping with venom. How one human caused the collapse of an entire sector's defenses. Admiral Korath's hands trembled as he activated his report. Your Excellency, Jake Morrison wasn't just a prisoner. He was something we'd never encountered before. The hologram showed the transformed detention facility, now a mobile weapons platform that had single-handedly defeated 3 battle fleets. We underestimated the human concept of adaptation, Korath continued. On their world, they call it improvisation, the ability to take available resources and create something entirely new. Impossible, scoffed Counselor Vex. No single being can. With respect, sir, Korath interrupted. Jake Morrison proved that human ingenuity, combined with professional kitchen management skills, creates something unprecedented. He didn't just escape. He built an army. He didn't just fight back. He created a revolution. Meanwhile, light years away, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of what had once been an Imperial detention facility. Around him, his crew of former prisoners worked with the smooth efficiency of a 5-star restaurant during the dinner rush. Chef, called Vila from her engineering station, we're receiving distress calls from 17 human colonies under Imperial control. Jake nodded, his expression calm. What's our response time? 12 hours to the nearest colony, sir. Then we'd better start cooking. Jake turned to address his crew. Listen up, everyone. We've got hungry people to feed, and the Empire has been keeping them from their dinner long enough. A chorus of agreement rose from beings who had once been considered the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Now they were something else entirely. The first crew of humanity's first starship, united not by species or ideology, but by a shared understanding that everyone deserved to eat at the table of freedom. Grix, Jake called. Prepare the liberation protocols. Kresh, coordinate with the human resistance cells planetside. Vila, I want you to slice into every Imperial communication array within 100 light years. What's the message, Chef? Vila asked. Jake's smile was warm now, filled with the satisfaction of a master chef about to serve his greatest creation. Tell them that dinner is served. Tell them that Earth's children are coming home. And tell them... He paused, looking out at the stars that held billions of enslaved humans. Tell them that nobody goes hungry on my watch. As the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, Jake Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From Marine to chef to prisoner to liberator. Each step had prepared him for this moment, when all of his skills would be needed to serve the greatest meal of his life, freedom itself. The stars streaked past as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying its crew toward their next mission. Behind them, the Imperial fleet limped away, their crews forever changed by their encounter with humanity's greatest secret weapon, the unbreakable will to turn any situation into an opportunity. In the ship's galley, Jake began preparing the crew's evening meal. Simple food, nutritious, satisfying. But as he worked, he smiled at the irony of it all. He had started as a chef who became a warrior, then a warrior who became a prisoner, then a prisoner who became a liberator. But at heart, he remained what he had always been. A human who understood that the most important battles weren't fought with weapons or technology. They were fought with the same ingredients that made great food and great teams: patience, precision, creativity, and the absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. As the ship raced toward its first liberation mission, Jake Morrison, former Marine, former chef, current revolutionary, began planning the menu for humanity's long-overdue freedom feast. After all, he had learned long ago that the best meals were always worth waiting for. And this one was going to feed an entire galaxy. The end.